stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now, huh?
Thanks, Jerry, and hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Samantha Bentley, and this is the 1019th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, it's part 4 of Bill's summer of 2006 motorcycle road trip. If you'll recall, in parts 1, 2, and 3, he left the Chicago area near O'Hare Airport and proceeded to Fairmount, Indiana to visit James Dean's hometown. From there, it was off to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for a quick stop. Then it was on to the United States Air Force Museum just out of Dayton, Ohio. When we left you last week, Bill just arrived at the museum, but it was late and the facility was closed. Additionally, he was losing his light as darkness and threatening rain clouds loomed overhead. Still, he wanted to take a moment to shoot a quick piece explaining where he'd taken us. Bill?
Well, we're here, folks, as you know. And I think I've already explained, although maybe you can't hear me when I'm on the highway, I've already explained the reason for this is because years ago when I was a flat track motorcycle racer, traditionally the opening race of the flat track season was Springfield, Ohio, typically early April. Sometimes it was funny because sometimes you'd be standing there with snowflakes in the air and sometimes with sleet in the air, but they kind of wanted to be first to get the season off all the time. As a matter of fact, a little funny story, and I hope I can find these pictures, but there were a couple of pictures when I first got my XR 750 Harley Davidson, and the XR 750 Harley Davidson flat track bike had a Fairbanks Morse magneto mounted forward of the engine crankcase right behind the front wheel. So if there was any moisture on the track or anything like that, it would be the first thing to start giving misfires and all of that. In any event, naturally I get out there and practice. It's one of the first races of the season. I'm on a new bike and this thing is awesomely fast, and sure enough it starts shooting ducks, as we used to call it. Running down the straightaway, all of a sudden pop, 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 pop. Moisture in a mag. I worked on it and worked on it and worked on it. Now I will admit, if I found the pictures I'm talking about, you're seeing them now, these were kind of staged. What I did was I grabbed a couple of the biggest tools that I could find so they'd be visible in the picture, just to show that what I'm doing is working on the bike and how frustrated I am. In any event, when we go to that event, when we go to Springfield every year, and by the way, I've got little fruit flies and stuff flying around me here because the sun is just starting to go down. When we go to that event, we'd always pass this sign that said the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Museum, Military Aircraft Museum. It always had pictures of cool military fighter planes on it and all that. And all of us, we said, one of these days, we've got to go and see that thing. That really looks cool. Well, naturally, one of these days never came because we were always late for the race. And yes, usually it was my fault, but sometimes it was somebody else's fault. For whatever reason, never got it done. That was roughly, let's call it 35 years ago, roughly 35 years ago. Well, this week, I should say, we're going to get it done. We're going to take a look at this great museum, and apparently it's a greater museum than I thought it was because I checked the internet when I decided I wanted to do this, and I gave the folks a call out here, and guess what? Here's something I didn't know. This is the world's largest military aircraft museum, the world's largest. I would have thought Arizona or something like that. Right here, right near Dayton, Ohio. I'm surprised more people don't know this. I'm surprised I don't know this. So anyhow, I'm excited about it. I'm excited about some of the aircraft we're going to be able to get to see. As I understand it, they have a replica of the Air Force's first aircraft, a 1909 something. Hopefully we'll find out, up to and including one of my all-time favorites, the Blackbird. And that's, well, we'll talk about, hopefully we're going to look at those airplanes tomorrow. We're going to talk about them. By the way, this is like a little memorial park here, and I read here, it says, in memory of those United States and Allied personnel who flew the Himalayas in the China-Burma India theater in World War II. And what they're talking about there is the flying over the hump. Many people think this was, well, everybody knows this was a significant significant effort, flying airplanes that really couldn't fly over the Himalayas. Typically, what I would call DC-3s, what they would call C-47s, would just barely make it over the mountains. Very, very dangerous, but very, very important work. And yeah, real brave people. Anyway, there are stories and stories and stories. I just wanted to tape something here before I left and try to find a place for the evening to sleep.
It certainly is a beautiful park. Hi, I'm Patty Borowitz, and what Bill didn't say was he had to hurry because it was obvious rain would begin at any moment.
Of course, it was bound to happen. It seemed like it was going to rain for the past 2 days. I got a few raindrops here and there, and some dark clouds would go overhead, just trying to scare me and everything. About a half an hour, the skies opened up, and it was just pouring. Gives me a chance to test that shower cap rain hat thing as opposed to the interior plastic bags on the Nelson rig stuff. Anyway, hot, muggy, humid pretty much all day. And the sky, like I say, the skies just opened up. Fortunately, the motel I'm staying at said it was okay if I put the bike under the cover. I don't know if the audience can see it there. It runs all the way down. And it's right outside of my room here, so I can keep an eye on it for the night. So, in any event, not a total disaster. The only thing is I really wouldn't like it if I have to ride in the rain tomorrow. That I really would. Of course, the museum isn't that far from here, so it wouldn't be terrible, but it just makes a mess out of everything. But we'll see. What did we say before about it's not an adventure until something goes wrong?
Bill said the rain started falling while he was looking for a motel, and by the time he got the rain suit on, he was already pretty wet. Hi, I'm Janine Lauschat. The next morning it was still raining hard, so Bill couldn't get any helmet cam footage on the way back to the museum. The good news is he soon learned the United States Air Force Museum consists in large part of a 17-acre under-roof complex. The rain will not keep him from showing you this incredible place. Let's begin.
I know you're not going to believe me, folks, but it's raining out, really raining. I'm a mess. I'm soaked, and we are inside of this. As a matter of fact, it was raining so hard I couldn't even put the helmet camera on from the hotel to come in here. I'm really glad I shot that piece yesterday where we arrived. It was a little dark. We arrived at night, but at least you got an idea of what this place looks like. Now, I'm standing with the gentleman that's going to help us understand what this place is, and you are?
I'm Rob Bardawa. I work here at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force here near Dayton, Ohio, the birthplace of aviation, the place where the Wright brothers were born.
You know, I don't think much of Dayton, Ohio being a birthplace of aviation. I think of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. How am I misled?
Right. The Wright brothers were born here and invented the airplane here. They took it down to Kitty Hawk to test it, but the airplane was invented right here in Dayton, Ohio.
Now, as I understand it, this facility is the largest military aircraft museum in the world?
That's right. This is the world's largest and oldest military aviation museum. And we have more than 300 aircraft and aerospace vehicles and missiles, and we are the world's largest.
So I suppose we shouldn't be surprised to find it right in the middle of America in Dayton, Ohio, being that this is where the Wright brothers are from, rather than California or Arizona, where we tend to think of all these great airplanes.
Right, that's right, yeah.
Okay, as I understand it, by the way, this place is free, folks. Free everything. Free parking, this is the way a museum ought to be.
That's right. We have free parking and free admission. We're open 362 days a year, only closed on Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's Day, open from 9 to 5 every day.
Okay, is there anything else you'd like to, and by the way, I'm going to show you some really, just like I told you yesterday, I'm going to show you some really cool stuff. It's been, I don't know if I'm happy or unhappy about this. They told me this place wasn't here 33 or 35 years ago when I did my motorcycle racing. There was something here, but it was an old hangar, and the airplanes were parked outside and all that sort of thing, because this place is unbelievable. Now, I don't know, I'm sort of sorry I didn't see it 35 years ago and see it now, but if I had one or the other, I think I like this.
Yeah, we've grown exponentially over the years. We have, like I said, more than 300 aircraft and aerospace vehicles here. We have a missile.
Including intercontinental ballistic missiles. They have missile silos.
Right, including the missiles. We have everything from the 1909 Wright Flyer, which is behind me, to an SR-71, a B-2 stealth bomber. We even have a piece of the Berlin Wall. If you don't like aircraft, if you like history.
Right, it's all that we should say that. For us, obviously, our interest, this is Motorsports Unlimited, our interest is going to be the technology. They have an original German Me-262, the first jet fighter. They have an original one here with some cutaways of the engines. Just absolutely fascinating. However, that's not all this place is about. This place is also about a tribute to the brave men and women that have over the years fought for America. And I did a piece earlier about flying over the hump. You're probably too young to remember what that was all about, but those are some very brave people in airplanes that really couldn't do it, and somehow they worked their way over the Himalayas and helped in the war.
That's right, the Flying Tigers.
In China, sure.
Yes, we have that P-40 aircraft as well. So we have a mix of everything for kids to adults and people of all ages. Just something for everyone to see here.
All right, so if you're ever in the Dayton area, and if you're not, you ought to make it a point to be, because I've already walked through the place, and this place is awesome. And once again, I want to point out, this is all on the highways and byways of America. Something like this, free, something like the James Dean thing we showed you yesterday. All this stuff is free, and all you have to do is go out and avail yourself of it. Now, anything you want to add before I get going, because I have my work cut out for me here today?
We hope you come and visit us, and we do have an IMAX theater as well. We have a cockpit of a couple airplanes for kids to sit in. Adults sit in them as well. So we hope we get a lot of visitors from the Chicago area, and that you come and enjoy.
All right, we're going to see what we can do about that. And as I promised you yesterday, I am going to start with the very first aircraft for the United States Air Force.
The largest and oldest aircraft museum in the world. And right here within easy driving distance from Chicago. Who would have guessed? Now let's check out the United States Air Force's first aircraft.
I told you that I was going to start with the very first aircraft that the United States Air Force had. This is a 1909 Wright Flyer. Now, I don't want to try to trick you. It is not the original airplane. In fact, I'm sure that was crashed or damaged or taken apart many, many years ago. This is a replica of the very first United States Air Force aircraft. And I'm going to tell you something else in advance we're going to have to do. All I can give you is a little taste of this place, because it is obviously set up with the aircraft themselves being lit correctly and all that, and it's a tough television task to bring it to you. However, it's very, very important. The history that's here, the technology that's here, the aircraft that's here, and I just had a look at the Blackbird, and the Blackbird is in a particularly dark place, and it's a dark airplane, so I'm going to apologize in advance, but I would not leave this place without showing you the Blackbird, which to me is the other end of what you're looking at here. This is the beginning. The Blackbird is probably the end. In any event, 1909 Wright military flyer, exact replica. And by the way, I've talked to these guys a little bit now. They are absolutely dead serious about the authenticity of these things, including nose art on the aircraft. I would have thought that the modern times and political correctness and all this and all that would have been eliminated. Not so. They insist on it being absolutely authentic. It's very, very cool here. Now, from the 1909 Wright military flyer, let's see what we can find next.
Bill wanted me to underline the point that aircraft is the only replica in the facility. These folks pride themselves on original aircraft and authenticity. Of course, at the United States Air Force Museum, you have to show people the first Air Force airplane, but it doesn't exist anymore. So an exact replica was created, and they mean exact. Let's see what Bill picked next to show us.
As you might expect, folks, I'm like a kid in a candy store here today. All of the technology, the advancement of technology. What we're looking at here now is a Sopwith Camel. I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know what a Sopwith Camel is or hasn't heard of them. A wonderful, wonderful airplane, British-built airplane, if I remember correctly, and all of the information is, yes, it's British Sopwith Camel. Very, very important aircraft in World War I. This was 1917, so we've moved up a little more than a decade, and as you can plainly see, the technology has changed dramatically. They're starting to look more like real airplanes and all that. Now, I want to tell you this, and I want to say this once again. I wish I could bring you a bunch of this place. I can't. Right now, as I stand here directly up, we've got a Fokker triplane. I'd love to show you that too. There's only so much that we can do here today. All I'm trying to do, as I've said so many times on Motorsports Unlimited before, is give you a little taste. You're going to have to come here yourself to see. As a matter of fact, I was just talking off camera. In these hangars, 17 acres of aircraft inside the hangars. Very, very cool. Now, let's move up a few generations and see what we find next.
Everybody knows what a Sopwith Camel is? Come on, Bill. I don't, and I'll bet none of my friends do. Actually, I suppose that's what museums are for, to keep history alive. Now, it's true that every significant military aircraft in existence is at the museum, but it's also true there are many odd yet interesting aircraft creations. Bill picked one to give you an idea.
Now, this one probably wasn't, in fact, I'm sure it wasn't a significant player in any of the conflicts and all that, but I find it technically interesting, and that really is what Motorsports Unlimited is all about. What we have here is a 1917 flying torpedo. Apparently, the idea behind this was to have the thing, and I don't know, it must have been radio controlled because I don't see room for a pilot or anything, so it must have been a radio controlled thing, that this would be a thing that they would fly in the air to take out a ship and have the thing dive into the ground and the torpedo thing take over and off from there. Only built 50 of them. Presumably, the war was over, funding dried up and all that. But if you think these things are new ideas, this was 1917.
Bill is trying to pick out some technically different aircraft to give you an idea of what the museum has to offer. Of course, with over 300 airplanes on display, he can only pick examples, like this fine rotary wing airplane.
In the 30s, it was thought that this kind of aircraft was going to revolutionize aviation. These are the, I'm going to call it a gyrocopter. My friend Igor Benson, who I now know has passed away, one of the fellows that was one of the, I don't know if he invented the idea of the gyrocopter, but certainly he popularized it in the 50s with Popular Mechanics and all the rest of it. If some of you that are old enough will remember, it used to be in Popular Mechanics magazines. You'd see advertisements with one of these things without a pilot in it on a 100-foot rope from a fence post flying by itself because the wind was going. In any event, what this is this is a rotorcraft where the rotor is not powered. The speed of the airplane going forward makes the rotor blades flip around. They start flip around, developing lift and all the rest of it. Complicated physics with some real advantages that unfortunately the big disadvantage was being a rotorcraft. The top speed of the aircraft was relatively slow. You couldn't do 500-600 miles an hour or something like that for sure. So the idea was great. You could land it like a helicopter, take off almost like a helicopter, very short takeoff runway thing. In fact, they used to fly them into huge stadiums and land them inside indoor stadiums. But the disadvantage of slow flight, they got kind of left in the background of history, at least for now. One never knows in the future.
It must have been an interesting time in history. No one was quite sure which way aircraft design would evolve, and all kinds of various inventions offering advantages and disadvantages were tried. Some looked odd, and some looked cool, like this one.
Now, you would not expect a military aircraft to have this kind of a colorful look, and I looked at the description. I don't see an explanation as to why it was so colorful, but this was the very first all-metal military airplane, and the pilots, when they first got it, they absolutely loved it. They could fly much faster. It was called, affectionately known as a pea shooter. They could fly much faster than the earlier aircraft that were canvas and wood structure, this being all metal. As a matter of fact, I'll step out of the way of the wheel pants here a little bit. Everything is ferritin, everything is all metal. Much faster airplane, and this was occurring, I believe, in the 30s. So this was between the wars, when you wouldn't really expect a lot of technical advancement, but this really was big technical advancement.
Bill also wanted to show you an example of the many full-size dioramas the museum created in an effort to preserve history. How about an embarrassed World War II pilot in training?
Some of the displays that they have here are actually, like, I'm trying to think of what that's called, well, I can't think of what it's called right now, where you actually put together a little scene. And what's going on here, this is a military flight training plane that was used for many years, and I'm looking for the date as quickly as I'm speaking here. I don't see it. That's why we've got editing. In any event, the pilot back there is being chewed out by the commander, and what he did was he touched the brakes too hard too soon and stuck it on his nose, and the mechanics have sort of an all-knowing expression on their face that they've seen all this before. But this was military training, and boy, I wish I'll do it in editing. I'll tell you about what year this was. Obviously, all-metal airplane. In fact, it looks like a T-6 Texan. I'm not sure. We'll find out. But the point I'm trying to make is a lot of the displays that they have here are done in this fashion where they kind of help tell a story.
There were so many significant airplanes Bill had to walk past, he was feeling guilty. This one he just couldn't ignore.
We have now moved up firmly, well, almost firmly, into the World War II area, except this really wasn't World War II, at least not for America. This is the famous P-40 Warhawk, and the Curtiss P-40 Warhawk was an airplane that preceded just by a couple of years, all of the famous World War II fighter planes. This was in fact used in China by a group of volunteers, and the whole past is murky. I'm not going to try to detail the history of it, but the whole past is kind of murky of a group of dedicated volunteers that went over and tried to help defend the Chinese against the Japanese invaders. And it was obviously had to be sanctioned by the government because they got these great airplanes to use. But it was just prior to America entering the war, and the P-40 Warhawk has probably become one of the most recognized aircraft probably in the world, mainly because of the teeth that they painted on.
I've seen those airplanes in many war movies. I didn't know it was a Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. Cool name. Now, Bill wanted to check out another diorama to show off the fact he knew the word.
Well, my host here for the day has just, Rob, I should say, has just embarrassed me on 2 occasions. The word I was looking for a couple of pieces ago was diorama. These are dioramas when they create these figures and, kind of a little slice of life is what they're trying to accomplish here. And that is the word I was looking at. He was right. In addition to that, he told me something else. I mentioned I am surprised at how many people there are working their way through the place today. And he says they get over 1 million visitors a year. Now, do I have to tell you how embarrassed I am that I didn't know about this place, and the only thing I knew about was my 35-year-old memory from when I was racing motorcycles and the sign that I saw? In any event, what we are standing in front of right now is a B-25 Billy Mitchell bomber. Probably most of you know this airplane from the story 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, where General Doolittle made the first raid over Japan in World War II. This was a famous plane, actually sort of a surprisingly famous plane in my opinion, because it only had 2 engines, and most of the bombers at the time were 4-engine bombers. But a very important aircraft, and the only bomber they could fly off of an aircraft deck, and that's why Doolittle used it.
Bill said the museum had some really beautiful dioramas involving sound effects and dialogue. Unfortunately, we could only show you so much, and the next aircraft just couldn't be omitted.
There are arguments that rage constantly about what the greatest airplanes were, and it depends on the era, it depends on lots of things, but the B-17 bomber is certainly in anybody's discussion of what some of the world's great airplanes. These are the ones that you see in the World War II movies where they're flying back with half of the tail shot away, the wings are shot away, and the airplanes are still flying, and they would crash them under horrendous situations, and most of the crew would walk out of them. An incredible, rugged airplane that was really responsible for turning the tide of the war. Now, it's true that this was not the one that ended the war, and hopefully we're going to get to that one in a few minutes, but this was really a very, very important aircraft. And something else important about this one. Notice I said about the nose art. This was typical during World War II. Most of the pilots, whether it were fighter planes or bombers or what have you, had nose art on the plane. And I would have thought that they would have, in all likelihood, removed the nose art because of political correctness in that these days. I am so pleased to see that they haven't done that. This is part of our history. We don't have to rewrite history in the interest of political correctness. This is the way it was, and boy, we certainly have nothing to be ashamed of, that's for sure. But the B-17, awesome airplane, 4-engine bomber, came back many times, 3/4 of an airplane, and still flying.
Keep in mind, these are real, original aircraft, not replicas. Pretty amazing. This stuff is all within easy driving distance of Chicago, unless you're like Bill and wander all over the countryside. And, oh yes, free. Now, we said original aircraft. Everyone knows the airplane that carried the atomic bomb to Hiroshima was called the Enola Gay. It's in the Smithsonian. Do you know the name of the airplane that carried the second atomic bomb to Nagasaki?
The B-17 you just looked at was the airplane that turned the war, but the one that won the war was the B-29, and this is the B-29 bomber, and there are 2 that were the most famous. The first was the Enola Gay, and the Enola Gay was the one that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, and the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki with an airplane called the Boxcar, and this is the Boxcar. This is the one that dropped the bomb. Now, I am particularly interested that they've got a replica of the bomb on the other side. The detail, I don't know if you can hear in the background, we're hearing some noise from some of the other dioramas where they actually had the engine started and they had crew members calling out clear and all that sort of thing, and giving just a little flavor of the war period and all that. Very, very cool. I will tell you this, folks. I always tell you that I'm just giving a little taste. Well, I will tell you, I'm not even giving you a taste on this one. I am walking past airplane after airplane after airplane that is significant in catching my eye, and we can't put them on all. We've just got so much time to do this in. This is a place that you make sure you come to, and not just if you're in the area. This is a place you travel to. I just talked to a guy from Germany, came all the way from Germany to come to this place. Pretty cool.
Bill says one of the sexiest looking fighters of World War II, outside of the P-51 Mustang, of course, was the P-38 Lightning. They had a couple of variations. Bill picked one.
Of course, many people feel that the sexiest airplane of World War II was the P-51 Mustang, and I've got to admit, I can't argue against it. The P-51 just had the lines right, it had the right performance, it was a magnificent achieving airplane, and all of the rest of it, more important, as I said earlier, had the lines right. Beautiful looking airplane. Another one of the airplanes, though, I think from World War II, is kind of on the same shelf, and that's the P-38 Lightning. The P-38 Lightning had sort of the Mustang look, and it had very tapered, thinly tapered fuselage and wing areas, but this one had two engines. It was a two-engine fighter, so it didn't have the maneuverability of the P-51, but it had the range and the high-flying capability and all that. And the P-38 Lightning was also an important player in World War II, so I don't want to let that be forgotten. They've got P-51s here also, but I wanted to do a piece with a P-38. And now I'm going to take you to a place where the other side is representative of what I think is perhaps one of the most important aircraft of all time.
Of course, Bill is a technical person, and finding an original example of the world's first jet plane drew him like a magnet.
In my judgment, one of the most important aircrafts ever. This is the German Messerschmitt Me-262. This was the first jet fighter in the world. Very, very important because the Germans were well ahead on jet engine technology. Yes, the British were working on jets and had something running on the stand, and even Americans were working a little bit, but the Germans had fully successful operational jet engines to such a degree that they could actually design an aircraft around them. This aircraft was 100 to 150 miles an hour faster than the fastest thing that we had. Not only do they have one of these original aircraft here at this museum, they also have a cutaway of one of the original engines. They have a non-cutaway, an engine in its entirety. In addition to that, and folks, I cannot show you even a taste of this. They also have a buzz bomb, an original buzz bomb. These are the ones they're often identified as rockets. They weren't rockets. These were the ramjet engines that they sent bombs flying over England in. They've got one of those in their entirety with a cutaway of the engine. If you want to learn how a ramjet works, not just that. The rocket plane, the German rocket plane that they developed just towards the end of the war, one-person airplane that would take off, fly 600 miles an hour, attack, and then coast back to the ground. They've got one of those here with engines sitting on the ground, so you can examine what the engine looks like and kind of figure out how it works and all that. All right here. I cannot believe I didn't know that all this was here. Folks, again, scratching the surface is not the right word.
Next, Bill had to walk past dozens of important World War II airplanes to move to the next major conflict, the Korean War.
I'm sure that you know that it pains me. I have walked past literally hundreds of aircraft. Hundreds, is that? Yeah, I guess I could say hundreds of aircraft that I would have loved to have shown you, and there's only so much time. You really have to come to enjoy something like this. You really have to come on your own. I've tried to do it by eras, the very earliest airplane as we work our way up. We've been through World War II. Now a little bit about the Korean War. This is the famous Saberjet, and the Saberjet was a very significant airplane. When we first went over to Korea, we tried using some of the P-51 Mustangs and all that, and we found out right away the enemy had something called a MiG, and it was faster, and it was a jet, and it was more maneuverable and all the rest of it. Had something else too, because Americans had jets also, and I'm thinking of I believe it was the Lockheed Starfighter. I'm not exactly sure the designation, but it had straight wings, and I thought it was one of the coolest looking airplanes, one of the very first American jet fighters. I thought it was one of the very coolest. On the other hand, it didn't have the speed of the MiG, so they come up with the Saberjet, and the Saberjet was an awesome aircraft, and it was pretty much the equal of the MiG in every way. The MiG was probably a little more maneuverable because it was lighter. On the other hand, it didn't have the armament, and it didn't have the staying power of the Sabre. So the Saberjet, the jet you're looking at behind me, is the airplane that really settled the Korean conflict.
And the airplane it had to go up against was the Soviet-built MiG.
This is the enemy, folks. This is the famous MiG-15. Really pretty awesome aircraft in its own right. Different philosophy. This airplane is light, fast, maneuverable, but also very, very fragile. This was the airplane that really provoked the development of the Sabrejet, which answered it in a different way. More firepower, higher cruising speed, although it didn't have the climb rate or the maneuverability rate, but it had survivability over the MiG-15. But I don't want to in any way denigrate this airplane. This airplane, like most of the American stuff, was built off of German technology. After World War II, the Russians grabbed a bunch of the German scientists, the Americans grabbed a bunch of the German scientists, and that reflected very quickly in the Korean conflict. Obviously, it was the Russians that provided the MiGs. The Koreans certainly didn't have anything like this. It was from the Russians. And they had a swept-wing fighter, and that was all part of the German technology. The Germans were working on the swept-wing fighters before the end of World War II, and that came in on the MiG-15. And when the American pilots saw that, they went back and reported what they'd seen, and the Americans started working on the German technology of the swept-wing fighter that ended up with the F-86 Sabrejet. Anyhow, do keep in mind, all of this is really about technology. Yes, we can get involved with the politics of the war and the argument and what created it and all that sort of thing, but as far as how we end these conflicts, it's always ended with superior technology. And this is probably a prime example of that, of the development of the F-86 Sabrejet to counteract the MiG-15. And later on, we'll get to a little further of where we went from the F-86 Sabrejet. But it's all about technology driven. It's a little bit, when it comes to military, it's a little bit like Formula One auto racing. You absolutely cannot be second. It doesn't make any difference what it costs to go 1/2 of 1% better. You have to win. And that's what the military is all about. That's why people in motorsport like myself love looking at military things, because we can see the progression of technology and maybe get a few ideas for our own stuff.
It's obvious Bill is very enthusiastic about the place. And why not? Who would have guessed that there was a place this close that could comfortably house an enormous B-52?
When you talk about magnificent airplanes and important airplanes, you'd be hard-pressed to find anything much more important and much more magnificent than the airplane behind me. This is the world-famous B-52 bomber, which has been used since the very early 50s, and guess what, folks? It's still in service today for some kinds of operations. The magnificent B-52 bomber, who would have guessed that would be the way? To me, this is going to sound silly, to me the B-52 is the Rolling Stones of aviation. Who would have guessed after all these years the Rolling Stones would still be rocking and rolling? Who would have guessed that the B-52 bomber, after all of these years, would still be in service? An incredible airplane. Now, obviously, I can't give you a great camera shot of it. It's just too big, folks, but it gives you an idea of how big this place is. Let me remind you, 17 indoor acres, 17 acres of aircraft indoor. And my apologies for only little bites and pieces of this place. Once again, this is a place in fact, you can't come here. I'll tell you right now, you cannot come here for one day. You're going to plan to spend 2-3 days in order to see everything.
The United States Air Force Museum is huge. It has to be, to house so many huge airplanes. Now, we started with the Wright Flyer, went through the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's Star Wars time.
Well, here's something that I'll bet the kids out there can tell me something about, because to them, this is probably old hat. They've seen it in magazines, they've seen it in news stories and all that, and it's amazing how times change. But this is the famous B-2 stealth bomber. And when I say it's the famous B-2 stealth bomber, what I'm talking about is the latest top secret. And this is the only place in the world where you can see one of these aircraft. This is not a model. This is not a replica. As a matter of fact, none of these aircraft, other than the very first one, the Wright Flyer, because that one doesn't exist anymore, that was recreated. But everything else that you have seen are original airplanes, original technology, original engines, and all the rest of it. Pretty magnificent. Now, in addition to the B-2, which was the smaller of the bombers, they also have the B-1 bomber here. It's a huge airplane. Hopefully I'm going to get a picture of that and show that to you too. Once again, I could spend several days here taping programming. We've gone from the very early stuff to this very latest modern high-tech stuff. But guess what, folks? We haven't gotten to the one that I think is the most important yet, the Blackbird. And let's see if we're going to do that one next.
That's a beautiful airplane. Now, before we get to the one Bill thinks is the most beautiful, his pet Blackbird, we want to show you the absolute latest in American fighters. Remember, this is not a replica. It's the fighter replacing the Tomcat, the Eagle, and the Hornet, and the museum already has one.
I said the Blackbird was going to be next, but I lied because I spotted this one, and I want to make sure I presented this to you. This is an example of the latest American fighter. This is the hot ticket right now, the F-22, just really coming into service now. I can't believe they have an example of this. Once again, it's not a model, not a replica. This is an original aircraft. As a matter of fact, I think I said before, all of the stuff you've been looking at is all original aircraft, other than the very first one, which was a recreation, because obviously that airplane doesn't exist anymore. I love everything about this. Unfortunately, I don't know enough about this. I understand a great deal of it is carbon fiber and composite. Unfortunately, I don't know enough to tell you. Very, very top secret. I am privileged to have a chance to take a look at it here, and anybody that comes to this place obviously can take a closer look at it. Of course, they won't let me open it up exactly, but at least you get a chance to look at it. But now I wanted to, and by the way, you might be wondering if this is the latest high-tech military fighter, and it is. And the Blackbird, what you don't know, has been out of service now for 10 years. Why do I save the Blackbird for last as kind of the final statement of all these high-tech airplanes? Well, I'm going to explain that in a moment when we get to the Blackbird.
Bill said he couldn't believe they had an F-22 Raptor. It's the latest in America's arsenal. Apparently, they work hard to keep things current. This sounds like a place you have to visit every year to see the new stuff. Now let's take a look at Bill's heartthrob, an airplane that's been retired for a decade. Yet, despite Bill's affection for the latest technology, this one's his favorite.
Well, this is it. This is the one that I saved until last. This is the famous Blackbird, and also called the SR-71, if you're into that sort of a thing as an identifier. I like the sexier names. This is the Blackbird, and the reason it's called the Blackbird, by the way, and it's one of the reasons I love this airplane, is it's all titanium. And this is the color of titanium. If you want to know what titanium looks like, this is it. Those of us that work with titanium, that do some fabrication and all that, we understand. And interestingly enough, titanium is the most corrosion-proof material that you can use. The food packing industry, which has used stainless steel for decades, is little by little transferring over to titanium, because titanium is even less corrosion sensitive than stainless steel. This airplane, I'd like to tell you a lot about it, but guess what? Most of it is still top secret. It's been retired for about 10 years now, for a decade, and even 10 years after its retirement, no one really knows what the top speed is. I was talking to Rob before we went on, and he said it'll go from, I don't know, was it Washington, D.C. to California in like 68 minutes or something. But even that information is what they will release. This is an incredibly fast airplane, but it's been retired. Now, you might say, if it's the fastest airplane in the world, as a matter of fact, faster, much faster, which it is, than that latest fighter I just showed you, why in the heck is it retired? Well, the reason is because it's not a fighter. It's a reconnaissance airplane. This is one of those, like the U-2, and they also have one of those here, but like the U-2 that was to fly high over other countries so fast that it couldn't be caught by missiles and take pictures. And its work has now been replaced by satellites. That doesn't mean all of the technology in here, though, isn't still top secret. It is still top secret, and I am just absolutely impressed that this is, once again, one of the few places in the world where you can actually get close to an SR-71, the famous Blackbird. And by the way, during the development process, you might be interested to know that the biggest problem that they had, because it's such a fast airplane, was what to do with the leading edge surfaces, because the leading edge surfaces on the titanium all the way around, and that's the reason the airplane looks the way it does, will actually glow red hot in flight. Very tough problem, as you know, and we've talked about this on Motorsports Unlimited. When you get faster than the speed of sound, the problem is the air molecules that would strike the leading edge of the wing or the leading edge of the fuselage no longer just flow over the surfaces. At that point, they pierce the air, and when it pierces the air, it creates heat. When it pierces the air as fast as this thing goes, it really makes heat. You're almost talking about re-entry speeds on, and we're getting an announcement right now, I hope you can still hear me. We're almost talking about re-entry speeds on things like the shuttle and all the heat that's developed there. Anyway, on this aircraft, and this was done by the famous Skunk Works, which is responsible for so much advanced aircraft technology, on this particular aircraft, it was handled by these very, very thin leading edge surfaces and having the entire aircraft be out of titanium. Anyway, just a little bit about what I know about this thing. What a wonderful visit this place has been, and guess what? Even though we're done with the airplanes, we're not done.
We're done with the airplanes, but we're not done? How can that be, Bill?
Trust me, folks, there is no way for us to photograph this. they've got a missile silo here. These are actual real missiles behind. In fact, one of the most, no, I won't say that because every room is interesting. I was going to say one of the most interesting because if you go into the floor of this area, they've got examples of many of the rocket motors from solid rockets to liquid fuel rockets and all of the rest of it. And all again, once again, these aren't models. These are the real thing for somebody who wants to study rocketry and see how these things work and how they're done, what a place this is. And I don't know all the models of the rockets they have behind me, but in a few minutes I'm going to talk to Rob again, and maybe he can give a little bit more rundown because I kind of think this is the newest part of the facility. It's huge. Until you come in close to these rockets, you really have no idea quite how big they are. In any event, we're getting close to the end. Again, if I haven't said it enough, I'm going to say it again and again and again. You have to come to this place and you have to spend some time here. This is just awesome. I have no idea. 17 acres indoors, 1 million visitors a year. This is really worthwhile.
It's so cool that everything is inside. It's been raining most of the day outside, yet Bill and Rob have been able to comfortably tour the museum. Speaking of Rob, it's time to wrap up our visit to the National United States Air Force Museum.
Well, I have a guy that's probably glad to see that I'm ready to go now, even though I'm not really ready to go. And as I complete one plane after another, I keep saying as we're walking by all these great planes, gee, I should include, I should do it. I can't. I don't have enough time on the show. Rob, first of all, thanks for your patience today. It's been a long day walking on concrete for you.
Well, thank you, Bill. Thanks for stopping by, and we hope we've given you a taste of what we have here at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. We really feel we have something for everyone. The exhibits, the aircraft, we hold the stories for those who have served our country, and we enjoy telling those stories, and we hope you'll come by to check those out.
Yes, let me say that of course this is Motorsports Unlimited, and our interest is always technology and the technology that's represented in all of the military aircraft, because of course the military aircraft are always the cutting edge, leading state-of-the-art technology, and that's our interest. However, I couldn't help but be taken by the number of dioramas that you have here that really tell the story of how it was on a desert island with certain aircraft needing to be serviced, and how it was a B-52 bomber on an Air Force day. Somebody went through a ton of trouble. There are, do you have an idea how many dioramas?
We have several hundred dioramas throughout
with
the museum.
Audio and everything.
Yeah, a lot of them have audio, and everything that goes into a diorama is researched first. They have to find out what they wore, what color the uniform should be, the color of the sand if it was outdoors, everything to the last detail. And
yes, even I was even listening to it, even some of the slang that the guys used and everything apparently was carefully researched. Not only that, you've got any number of video things going on where people can sit in small groups in front of a video and look at some action of this during its period when the aircraft was actually in action, if there was video of it.
Right, that's correct. We have several audio visuals throughout the different aircraft and throughout the museum to help enhance that experience and tell that story.
And the most important thing, watch, I'm putting him on the spot. I see the little look of panic across his eyes. And the most important thing, let's see if he gets it.
The most important thing is that the museum is free.
You did it. Free. That's it. Free parking. How often can you find that? Free parking, free to come in. An incredible, wonderful, and I will say this, absolutely first-class facility. Very, very compelling.
What a find! It's amazing what you could see traveling the highways and byways of America. When Bill was leaving, he wanted to take one final look around.
Boy, what a place.
Bill is trying to do is position himself to show you the very beautiful and touching United States Air Force Museum Memorial Park. It's really quite beautiful, but the rain was starting to fall again. He couldn't stop.
What an incredible place. Amazing. I feel stupid and embarrassed that I didn't know about it. And by the way, yes, indeed, they are motorcycle friendly. They got motorcycle parking here. 1 million visitors a year. Amazing. And I didn't know about the place other than my 35-year-old memories of seeing the sign on I-70 when we were going to Springfield, Ohio for the opening race of the season. But of course, this is not, as we've already explained, this is not the same facility that they had back then. This is big time, no doubt about it. This is very big time. I could have done dozens of shows here talking about technology and how it's changed from piston engines to supercharged piston engines to jets to rockets, all with original pieces. The original pieces that were developed. Hard to believe. All under one roof. One roof, I should say it's 3 hangars all connected together, so it's kind of like one roof. 17 acres. Just awesome. Just absolutely awesome. That's all I can say. What a worthwhile thing. You know, on the other hand, I also want to say something else. I also very much enjoyed the James Dean thing for a different reason. The James Dean, stopping by James Dean's hometown, his birthplace and all that, what most struck me about that, I'm just taking a look over, being distracted by other aircraft that got parked outdoors, and by the way, they've got a whole other building, as I understand it, for a presidential museum of presidential airplanes. Anyway, yes, the grandioseness of this is wonderful and compelling and all that, but there was something very charming about the total and complete lack of commercialization of the James Dean hometown. I found that particularly interesting, not even so much as a motel. Really amazing. You'd think some people would have already tried to capitalize on that and everything. I'm glad they haven't. It gives it the James Dean kind of charm. So when you're traveling the highways and byways of America and you're looking for interesting things, obviously when you come to something like this, the Air Force Museum, you're going to be blown away. Its grandness is hard not to be impressed with. On the other hand, don't miss out on the charming small attractions. They're just as important in their own way, just as compelling.
It was now time for Bill to figure out how to get to his 4th and final destination.
Hope everybody noticed I used my turn signal there for changing lanes and remember to turn it back off. Lost here. This is a little confusing for a new guy. I might have passed the place I just needed to go. See you in a minute. Yes, I did. I think I was supposed to turn back there. one would think that none of this stuff would find its way out of the edit suite. And yet I go ahead and put it in anyway. Yeah, I think I was supposed to turn at that first road that came out. Sure hope so. Actually, the way the weather is looking, what I would like to do is eat quickly, put the sunblock on, and yes, I can feel it. Boy, my arms hurt. I'm going to need to get the sunblock on right away. Eat quickly, get the sunblock on, and hit the road, because I've got several hours of traveling to go. Depending on the weather, it might be 4 or 5 hours, or it might be 10 hours if I've got to be slowed by the rain. So as long as the rain seems to be on and off, maybe I should get as much driving done as I can while it's off. Now here's my idea of a town, local tune-up place, got a sprint car out in front, so obviously somebody in there runs a sprint car. That's cool.
Bill would like to remind you, a motorcycle road trip is as much about the ride as it is about the destination. Maybe more. He says the expression young people often use today, "It's all good," is perfect for describing motorcycle travel.
That's right. He says it doesn't matter if it's cold, raining, or a beautiful day. It's all good.
In fact, he says the varying weather is the spice of motorcycle travel. Anyway, let's rejoin him as he finds a place to eat, check his maps, and plan his strategy.
Well, let's see, there's the Waffle House on the left. I ate there last night. Interesting, I don't think we have that in Illinois either, because a couple of years ago I was in Ohio and I stopped at one of those and liked it. I like this one, but I don't think we have those in Illinois. It's odd, now up the road here there's a Big Boy, and I remember Big Boy used to be popular in Illinois, but now that I think of it, I don't know if there are any more Big Boys anymore, but apparently they're still in business. I wonder what happens, like with the Ponderosa, Big Boys, Waffle House, if they ever were. I wonder why they don't. Interesting question. I don't know if it has to do with laws or franchising, territorials. I don't know. Interesting question, though. There it is. Yeah, it's been years since I've been in the Big Boy. Actually, haven't had a hamburger or anything like that since the heart problems and everything. But I suppose it wouldn't hurt on the road trip. As always, trying to find a place to park the bike where I can keep an eye on it. Yeah, this looks like it'll do it. Across from the open windows.
While Bill was eating, the skies opened up and the rain came down. We won't have to worry about it this week, though, because we're out of time with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Chuck Itzenthaler, Sue Kazanda, our webmaster Frank Barbalace, Rena Borwitz, and Tom McGrady. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Janine Lauschat, Patty Borwitz, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Samantha Bentley, still thinking about the United States Air Force Museum. Something really special you shouldn't miss. Thanks for watching. See you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from PB Food Products, located on 47th Street at Western Avenue in Chicago, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grant Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from the Chicagoland Toys for Tots Motorcycle Parade, held on Western Avenue in Chicago, the first Sunday in December.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue at 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in the County Farm Plaza at County Farm Road and Army Trail Road in Carroll Stream, Illinois. Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, it's off to destination number 4, and as you can see, it rained. I mean, really rained. It didn't make any difference though, it's all good. The weather is something you cannot escape on a motorcycle, and in fact is part of the spice of riding. Now, in case you didn't notice, I carefully avoided telling you where we're going. Tune in next week to Motorsports Unlimited and find out.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye. And keep on rocking.